Alright guys, today we are talking about the surface area of prisms and pyramids. First we're going to talk about rectangular prisms. So the formula is kind of lengthy, so I'm going to write it out and try to explain it as best as I can as I go. So when we are looking at surface area, we're looking at the covering of that entire three-dimensional figure. So think about wrapping like a present for your birthday or for Christmas or a gift for someone, and you are trying to cover every single part of that. So we know there are 6 faces. So I would take 2 and multiply by the length times, I'm going to make a little L so you know the length times the width. So that accounts for 2 faces with those dimensions. And then I would add that to 2 times the width and height. And then I would add it to 2 times the length and the height. Okay. Now, you could also rewrite that if you find, I think that the second way is a little bit easier. I know that I have 2 of each type of face in a rectangular prism, so I would take 2 times the length and width plus the width and height plus the length and the height. So essentially the difference between these two is that you just factored out a 2 and you're kind of multiplying that in after you've calculated each area of each face. So we're going to look at a couple examples first. So for example 1, we have a rectangular prism. So if I'm looking at that bottom face, or the base in this case, I would take 5 times 2. I'm going to be doing it the second way. So I know it's 5 times 2, that's 10. If I look at that lateral face on the side, I have a face that is 7 by 2. So 7 times 2 is 14. And then if I'm looking at that front face that's connecting, it's another lateral face, but it's facing towards us. The dimensions of that one would be a 5 by 7. Rectangle, and so I would get 35 for that one. Now if I take all of those values and I add them together, so 10, 14, and 35, and I add them together, I would have 59. Okay? So from there, I know that I have 2 of each of these faces, so I'm going to take 59 and multiply by 2, so hence the last step in that formula. And I would get 118 inches squared. We're back to inches squared because we're talking about surface area, not volume. So we're looking just at the covering of that shape. Okay, so let's look at number 2. So the first face, we have the bottom base right there. So we have a 12 by 3 rectangle. So that would give me an area of 36. If I look at the lateral face that is a smaller rectangle, I have an 8 by 3, which is 24. And then this other side face, it's a lateral face, it would be a 12 by 8 rectangle, which is 96. So once again, I'm going to take all 3 of those values, I'm going to total them up. So I have 36, 24, and 96. When I do that addition, I would get 156. And then remember, I have 2 of each of these faces, so I'm going to take 156, multiply by 2, and I would get 312 inches squared. Okay, so the next one, we have a cube. So we know that in a cube, every single face has the same dimensions. So if we find the area of one of those faces, we can multiply it by 6 to get the total surface area of that entire cube. So 5 times 5 would be the area of one face. which is 25. Now, like I said, you have 6 of those, so you're going to take 25 times 6, and you would get a total of 150 inches squared. So cubes are a little bit easier. There's less work to write out because every face is the same size. All right, and then we have another rectangular prism. So if I'm looking at the base, I have a 10 by 16 rectangle. That would give me 160 for that area. If we look at that front rectangle, I have a 16 by 1. That would give me an area of 16. And then this lateral side right here, we would have a 10 by 1, which would give me an area of 10. Okay, so once again, if I total those up, I know they're not lined up perfectly, but if I added them all together, I would get 186. Once again, you have 2 of each of those. So I would take 2 times 186 and multiply, and get that to be 372 centimeters squared. All right, so now we move on to triangular prisms. Okay, so the only difference with triangular prisms is that instead of all of your faces being rectangles, now you have 2 faces that are triangles. So to find the surface area of triangular prisms, you calculate and add the area of the triangular bases and the areas of the rectangular faces. All right, so for this one, I know that I have 2 triangles. Okay, and then my remaining 3 faces would be rectangles, so I have 3 rectangles. Okay, it's always nice to kind of note, especially for triangular prisms and when we get down to pyramids, how many of each kind of face that you have, because it'll keep your work neat. It's definitely not mandatory, but it kind of helps to keep things organized. So this triangle down here is our base. I know it's kind of hard to see, but your base is 6, and your height of that triangle would technically be 4. So when I'm calculating the area of that triangle, I'm going to do 4 times 6 and divide it by 2. Okay, but since there are 2 triangles, I'm just going to multiply by 2 as well. So those 2's kind of cancel, and your total area for both triangles would be 24. And that's inches squared. Okay, so then we have 3 rectangles. So if I'm looking at the face that's closest to me, I have a 6 by 10. So that would give me 60. If I look at that other side over on this, to the right of that prism, I would have an 8 by 10, which is 80. And then I would have a 5 by 10 as well. So that's 5, and then 10 is that same length. Okay, so we have 5 times 10, which gives me 50. All right, so the biggest thing here, we don't need to multiply anything by 2 because we have all of our areas. We just need to add it all together. So I have 50 plus 80 plus 60 plus 24, and I would get 214 inches squared for my surface area. All right, the next one, so same kind of deal. We have 2 triangles. And then we have 3 rectangles, so I'll do the rectangles over this way. Okay, let's start with our triangles though. So my triangles, the base is 4, height is going to be 6, so you always have to pay attention to the vertical height. It might be tempting to use 7 as the height, but in this case you're looking from the distance from the very bottom of that triangle to the tip top. So this is going to be longer than what the actual height is. So I do 4 times 6 divided by 2, which would give me 1 triangle, but since I'm looking for 2, I'm multiplying by 2 again. and I would get 24. Okay, my rectangles, if I'm looking at the bottom one, I have a 4 by 12, which would give me 48. If I look at this side, I have a 7 by 12, which would give me 84. And then if I look at the other side as well, I have another 7 by 12, which would also be 84. So once again, you take all of these numbers and you add them up. Whoops. Okay, and when you add them up, you would get a total of 240 centimeters squared. All right. Okay, almost finished. So now we're looking at pyramids. All right, so to find the surface area of a pyramid, you should calculate and add the area of the base and the areas of the triangular faces. Okay, so sometimes your base might be, in both of these cases we have square bases. They also might be triangular bases. They could be rectangular bases. So you just have to pay attention to what kind of base it is for that pyramid. So for this one, we have one square. Okay, and then we would have 4 triangles. Okay, so just, I'm making note of what I have so I don't forget anything. So one square would be 15 by 15, which would give me an area of 225. Now for 4 triangles, they're all going to be the same length since the base is square. So I'm going to have a base of 15 for my triangle for every single triangle, and a height of 12 for every single triangle. And remember, when we are finding the area of a triangle, we do base times height divided by 2. Well, since there are 4 triangles, I'm just going to take that and multiply it by 4. So when I do that, I would get 360. So then my total for my surface area, I'm going to write it down over here, 225 plus 360 would give me a total of 585 meters squared for my surface area. All right, last one. Okay, so we have another square base. So I have one square. I have 4 rectangles. Once again, all of those rectangles are going to be the same size. So my square, I'm going to do 10 times 10 to get that area, which would be 100. My rectangles, I know the base is 10, the height is 28.7. Okay, and I'm going to divide that by 2, so that would give me the area of one triangle. Sorry, that's not right. Triangle. Sorry, guys. Calling them rectangles. Okay, so that is the area of one triangle. There are 4 of them, so I'm going to multiply by 4. When I get that multiplication, I would get 574. So to put it all together, now I'm taking 574, and I'm adding 100 to it, and I would get 674 feet squared for my surface area. All right. If you have any questions, please highlight that on your WISC, write one down, and don't forget to complete the questions that go along with this on your Google form. All right, we will see you tomorrow.